Salutations, you slippery slut monkeys. Today what we're going to be doing is something that you may have seen spreading like wildfire across the short form internet space at the moment on Instagram, and that is basically this guy called Danocracy, an Instagrammer and YouTuber who specializes in finding people from old photos and pieces of media by narrowing down the search by contacting photographers and all the people that may be involved. And in this story he's actually doing it for a skateboarder, which is why I feel like we can maybe help shed some light on this situation. Now, this man has teamed up with Tony Hawk to get this job done, and that in itself shows that this is a very interesting story in itself. Now, Tony Hawk's been involved in a lot of stuff, some good, some not so good, but this one I think is really interesting. So with all that being said, we're going to see if we can help out by sharing the information in this video. So who this guy is, this is the Danocracy channel. Funny enough, same name as me if his name is Dan, which is what it looks like. But yeah, what we're going to be doing is going through some of these videos. We're not going to go through all of them because I don't want to spoil his most recent content if you haven't seen it already. We're going to go through episode 1, episode 2, and see if we can help shed some light on the situation. Episode 3 and 4 just came out in the last week. After this video, make sure you go check out those to get the full up-to-date story, and maybe I'll do a more up-to-date video once those have been out for a little while because I don't want to take the traction away from this guy. So we're going to jump over to episode 1, full screen it, and see what happens.
This photo was taken in 1965, and recently skateboarding legend Tony Hawk posted about this photo asking if anybody knew who he was.
So Tony Hawk was the one that actually started this, which is incredibly sick. And he also did that documentary back in the day. I think it was called like The Search for Animal Chin, which is a similar situation where they tried to find a skater from like a certain video. I forget the details, but it was a really interesting watch when I watched it as a kid. But yeah, this guy, he's obviously the man to go to if you want to find something. His whole channel is dedicated on stuff like this. He used to do magic tricks, now he's into this.
Now, some of you guys tagged me in this post. Let's see what I can do here. Last night, Tony Hawk followed me on Instagram. Blew my mind. This guy's an idol of mine. But this morning, I actually woke up to a DM from Tony Hawk. And he basically said, hey Dan, if you're serious about trying to find this photo, I want in and I want to help you. Tony Hawk wants to collab with me? The answer is always yes. So I spent a number of hours trying to see what I could learn about these photos. And here's all the info that I'm working with right now. These photos were taken in 1965 at Central Park in New York City. The photographer...
So my audience is predominantly Americans, and at least a few of you must be from New York. So if you guys have literally any information on where this was taken, who this might be, if you have any relatives that skated back in the 1970s, you might have some information or know someone that has some information that could potentially help this story, which is the main reason why I'm making this video, is that, and it's just more cool skate news that I think we should shed light on. But yeah, this little mini series right here is super interesting.
The photographer is Bill Epridge, who at the time was doing a series on skateboarding in New York City for Life magazine. 3 years after these photos were taken, it was New York City in 1965, which is great info, but nowhere near enough to be able to locate this guy. Here's why. In 1965, New York's population was 15.1 million people.
Is that it? That seems like hardly any people. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a population expert.
And we're trying to find one. The culture and sport of skateboarding was at an all-time high. And between 1963 and 1965, an estimated 50 million skateboards were made. Which is
Jesus, I need to try and get some skateboards from that era. I've done the 1970s skateboarding. My watch shape skateboard is best, and it's the only skateboard that I've ever managed to quadruple kickflip, just because they're so small and lightweight. They flip so well. Like, them old school boards are really cool, but they used to have like metal wheels and were really different to what they are now, mainly because it was invented by surfers just so they could surf on concrete. But yeah, a little bit of interesting skateboard history for you. I'm related to the video, but it popped into my head, so I thought I would share.
Which is also important to these photos. These photographs were not captured because what they were doing was so crazy. Skateboarding was trending, and these scenarios were likely found all throughout New York City, which is why he was making a piece on it in the first place. It was trending and it was a craze. So all of that info makes this a very hard search. But
it was so foreign those days to see someone of this age skating. From what I can gather from the 1960s and 1970s, it seems that skateboarding was obviously predominantly for kids, and there was no real like professional side of it. There wasn't even skate companies. It was just like toy shops and stuff like that that were selling the skateboards, and it was surfing shops that originally started making their own boards, which is where the first in-house manufactured skateboards came from. So seeing something like this back then was extremely uncommon. Maybe it was a guy that they just said, right, can we get a cool shot of you? You look pretty stylish. Can we put you on the skateboard and get a cool shot? But either way, I don't think these shots were even used in the magazine that they're a part of.
What's interesting about all this, these photos were not even a part of the series that Bill did for Life magazine.
Exactly.
They weren't there. So it's interesting, out of all of those photos, these were the ones that got famous because of this guy. This guy has literally been called the mystery man because currently there is little to no information about who he was. And there there has been some growing theories that people think are true. For an example, one of the most popular theories is that this is actually Gregory Peck, well on set of To Kill a...
Doesn't look like him really at all. Like, I mean, it'd be better if we could see him with his mouth open, because the guy in the skateboard picture has like a gap in between his front teeth that you wouldn't normally see. It's a very uncommon feature to have that a gap that wide. This guy doesn't look like he has the same facial shape. The hair is obviously different, can be grown obviously, but yeah, it just doesn't look like the same facial structure to me.
A Mockingbird. And while I could see the resemblance in their faces, it doesn't check out at all. To Kill a Mockingbird was filmed on the back lot of Universal Studios in California in 1962. So both the location and the year do not line up. On top of that, Gregory Peck was born in 1916, which would make him 49 when these photos would have been taken.
I don't know, that guy, I mean, obviously the picture is very low quality, so you can't really tell the age, but that guy looks like early 30s, maybe mid 30s. And you think about it, right, back then in like the 1970s, people looked way older than they were, just because of how bad people's diets were and how people didn't know much about health and no one was keeping fit anywhere near as much as what they are now. So I feel like this guy could even be in his mid-20s, but certainly not up into his 40s and nearly 50 in my opinion.
Which, looking at this guy, the age also doesn't line up. Another theory is that since these photos weren't in the Life magazine piece, they were AI generated or created using Photoshop. Now I ran this through an AI detector and it came back negative for AI. Also, with the fact that there's 3 different shots all with the same features and people, it's pretty easy to tell this is not AI generated.
Yeah, and AI pictures always have like the hands messed up. I mean, you can get really good ones now, but I don't think that anyone is creating this consistent images in AI where they're so consistent throughout the 3 pictures, whereas like hands are in his pockets, nothing seems to be out of proportion. It just seems very unlikely.
So another false theory, and the final story that I read, is that this photo was naturally taken. This guy was apparently skateboarding through Central Park, came down this hill, and continued on with his life. Didn't stop to talk to people, didn't stop for the photographs, he just kept going. Which builds the mystique of who this guy is.
He could have just been using it literally as a form of transport. Like, everyone can be looking at this guy as like he's some sort of illustrious, mysterious skateboarder, but he could just be literally riding it to work. Like, he thought, how am I going to get to work? I don't want to pay for a bus. I don't want to pay for the subway. I just want to get there quickly and go through the park. I'm going to skate. It could just be literally as simple as that.
It's
and then
wild,
you might never find
but this
him.
needs to go out there. I have all this information, but one thing I've learned through my own research and finding people in vintage photos is that everybody has a connection. This guy had parents. Maybe he had kids. Maybe he had a wife. If he didn't, he likely had friends. Somebody knows something of this guy. And based off of the years, it is possible that he is still alive. So, I'm putting this forward. If anybody knows anything, please send me a message so I can look further into it. It's not every day one of your idols, by the way, Tony Hawk's skateboard is at the top of my Legends row right here. It's not every day that one of your idols asks for help. So of course I want to make this happen. Let's try and find this guy. That's what I'm working with so far. Super surface level, I get it. But the reason why he's called the mystery man is because there's nothing out there on him.
True. But anyway, that was the first video. We're going to watch one more episode, and then if you want to see the story where it is now, I'm going to encourage you guys to go to Dan's channel and watch the 3rd and 4th episode. But what we're going to do is quickly jump into the second one, because I'm curious. I haven't watched all of these yet, don't get me wrong. I've literally only watched the first one now, so we're going to jump into episode 2.
Welcome to episode 2 of Trying to...
But this has been an insanely interesting series, and I've seen it on Instagram blowing up. So we're going to watch episode 2 full screen. Let's get into
Welcome to episode 2 of Trying to Find This Mystery Skater with Tony Hawk. I was able to find some additional photos from this day, with some of them even including the guy that we're trying to find. Now, from these new photos that were discovered, we can now cross off the theory that this guy just came, skated by, and went on with his life.
Okay, so he's definitely part of the group. So he was obviously, maybe this could be even someone that was like in the media company that literally was just like, oh no, I know how to skateboard. Let me dress up and see if we can get some unique shots that are slightly opposing what these kids are doing. Because the kids are obviously always chilling and having fun. This guy's slightly more serious looking. It could be a nice dichotomy of pictures. But yeah, let's see how it goes.
Because we got a shot of him here at the top of the hill. We've got him skateboarding down the hill. So likely he did this multiple times, which could all be super helpful. Now, Tony has reached out to the wife of Bill Epridge and was told that the man was unidentified at the time of the shoot. So no luck there. But it's important that we lay out the facts. Now, we know that these photos were taken in 1965, but having a more dialed in time frame will help us make sure that we're looking in the right areas. This issue of Life magazine came out on May 14th, 1965.
Jesus, man, I would love to get some of these old skateboard magazines and maybe do like a little review on the channel. It'd be a super interesting little series. Let me know if you guys would be down for me like hunting down vintage skateboard magazines and just flipping through them and seeing what they actually withhold.
So we've already trimmed off 7 months from 1965 1965, which means we're left with a window from January to May. Now, we know this was Central Park in New York City. In fact, the exact location on Google Earth, based off of the bridge in the background here, as well as this low-rise here. These photos were taken right here at Pine Bank Arch, facing northwest. That's important to remember. Now, it looks a lot...
See, this guy can find anything, man. I've seen a few people on TikTok that do stuff like this, where people will challenge them to like find a certain tree in a certain country, and people can use the internet so powerfully to find these things with what seems to be quite ease. Like, just having that location is going to mean a lot to this story. So I think we might actually find this guy. And like I said, if you guys know anything about this situation, if you know this guy's family, friends, kids, whatever it may be, make sure you reach out to Dan or reach out to me, and I will forward the information on to Dan to make sure he doesn't miss the messages.
A lot different in 1965, obviously due to the growth of the surrounding trees, but it also looks like they've narrowed the walkway here. And just to confirm, if we zoom out, there should be a low-rise building right here. And then to the left of that, we should have this building with these long corner windows. Bam. This is the exact spot. Now let's look at the park itself. With New York City being in the Northeast, we know they get snowy winters. Now, pulling up historic charts on weather conditions in the year 1965 in New York City, we can
Completely unrelated, but I'd love to go to New York in the winter. It looks hella cozy.
see that it was below freezing for a large portion of January and February. And the people in these photos don't seem to be dressed for temperatures below freezing. Some of them are even wearing shorts, t-shirts, and no shoes,
socks,
telling us that these are warmer temperatures. The trees on the background don't seem to have any leaves on them either. So we can eliminate January and February, leaving us with March, April, and the first 2 weeks in May.
we're doing
now,
good
looking
so far.
further into March weather, we only have one day where the temperatures rose to the upper 50s. Now let's look at April's weather. As you can see, already the temperature is starting to warm up, with one day even being 75 degrees in the evening. And all the blue squares on this chart indicate a clear, sunny sky. You can see that these were taken on a dry, sunny day. Now back to that northwest direction that these photos were taken in. We can see that the shadows being casted from the surrounding trees, and even the shadows of the people skateboarding, are being casted to the right pretty heavily, meaning that the sun was shining at an angle from the west. Meaning this wasn't a morning photo shoot. It was...
See, man, all this information that he manages to pick up just from looking at these photos, insane. Honestly, this man, if anyone can do it, this man can do it. But the thing is, he still needs our help to try and find where this guy is coming from, to find his relatives. So I had to share this video in some way, because who knows, we could find the missing links that actually set this whole chain together again, and the guy could be identified. And if he's still alive, maybe we get him featured on one of this guy's videos. That would be sick.
Likely taken in the evening. Now, my guess are that these photos were taken in the month of April or early May of 1965 during the evening. So we went from all of 1965 to likely the month of April or early May. Now, with that information, I reached out to the Central Park Conservancy as well as the New York City Events Department, asking if they had any records of a skateboard event taking place in April or May.
Oh yeah, it does look like an event with all the people like coming down the side. And back in the day, skateboarding was more like just flowing and riding as opposed to doing any tricks or whatnot. It wasn't until Rodney Mullen really came around till we started seeing tricks, and the guy that invented the ollie, funny enough, his name had Ollie in it. That's where the name comes from. Another little tidbit fact for you there. But yeah, with all the people standing down the sides, it feels like this could be some sort of event, maybe premiering a new skateboard, an advertisement, and that could tie into why we have so many pictures. It could be for the ad space of the skateboard.
Of 1965. Now, while waiting to hear back from them, I decided to do research of all of the local newspapers in the New York area from 1965 to see if there's any mention of a skateboard event happening at Central Park, and nothing was advertised. Next, I took these photos and ran them through Photoshop. I wanted to see if I could pull any information from this guy's face. So I created a custom brush and started painting over his sunglasses. I then tweaked the settings, and I was able to see more of his eye features behind the sunglasses. It looks like this guy could be of Asian descent, which will open up another pathway for me to reach.
That's actually right. Like, I don't know, the face shape kind of tells me that he's like an American guy, but either way, like if you can see the eyes, I don't know how reliable that's going to be just by using a Photoshop brush to like remove the sunglasses, because his eyes through there are obviously going to be distorted, especially on a photo this age. So I don't know how reliable this is going to be, and it might send him down a tangent that isn't actually the right way. But this guy obviously knows what he's doing a lot better than I do, so I trust his judgment, but I don't know about that one.
Research. Next, Tony and I approached the former editor-in-chief of Life magazine, Bill Shapiro. Now, Bill was the editor-in-chief of the Revamp in 2004, so he wasn't there at the time of these photos. But when we spoke to him...
Is there any relation to Ben Shapiro? It's a very uncommon name.
He gave us more insight on how the magazine would have been run. Here's what Bill had to say. Life was in many ways the editor's magazine, meaning that many of the ideas came from the editors and were generated in the building, and then photographers were dispatched. My best guess is that a bunch of editors sat around a conference table and someone said something like, I see these kids on these skateboard things. I think it's a trend. Let's send someone out there to see what's happening. Epridge was a natural choice in some ways. A versatile photographer, so likely they called Epridge and told him to go to Central Park and report back.
Thing is, it was kind of a trend. Like back then, skateboarding was huge, then it goes down, then it comes back up, and it's done that for like the past 60 odd years. Right now, we had the 2020 boom of skateboarding and lockdown, and at the moment, things are kind of in a downtrend, which I've actually got a whole video on how we can save the skate scene coming up in a future video in the upcoming weeks, because trust me, it needs some revitalization. Even all the skate YouTubers aren't posting hardly at all anymore. There may be 5 or 6 of us that are going consistently.
This supports the theory that these could have been taken in April, with a quick turnaround time, so they were published in May. So by Bill's account, that does seem likely it could have happened. Next up, I drove down to San Antonio, Texas, where there's this antique store that has a large selection of Life magazines. I wanted to see if I could find a physical copy. Now, unfortunately, they didn't have this one, so I managed to source it online instead. Reading through the article, they cover 3
I imagine he drove all that way and couldn't even find the magazine. That is so annoying.
locations: Connecticut, Denver, and New York City. Now, for all the coverage in New York City, we only have 2 names in the article. It's from this photo. The woman riding the skateboard is labeled as Estelle Greer. Also labeled is her 10-year-old son, Peter. So with that, I ran a public record search for anybody named Peter Greer between the ages of 67 to 71 from New York. And bam, Peter Greer with relatives Estelle
69. Nice. But yeah, no, he's obviously the guy to ask.
Greer popped up. That's our guy. That's the boy from the magazine. He was there the day of the shoot, and he may know something. So last night I emailed Peter, and he responded within 10 minutes. And here's what he had to say.
No way.
Be sure to come back in 2 days for more of this search. And please continue to reach out if you find anything from this information. We're now starting to dial this in. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and follow for more.
Okay, well, that is super interesting. And like I say, if you guys have any information, if you're from New York or know any photographers or any skate shops that may have had something to do with this, make sure you reach out to Dan or reach out to me, also named Dan, and we can maybe get this ball rolling and help out the search. Anyway, I had to share this one. It was so bloody interesting. But I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.